All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. I hope everybody is doing well tonight. We are going to pick up where we left off on stream last week, and that is sort of redoing our asset system a little bit and neatening things up and also getting rid of a bunch of code. So, last week we kind of, I think, finalized the way that it works for binary assets. So now we need to kind of start thinking about the way that some of the other types of assets are going to work. I'm thinking we'll probably do textures because that's kind of a decent sized one that reaches into a lot of different places in the system. So that's what the plan is for tonight. Before we get into that, though, I do just want to take a quick
Good evening, Travis. Good evening, chat. Smile.
Smudge. Thank you so much for the tier 1 sub. I appreciate that. Good timing, by the way. 12 months, by the way. I really appreciate the support. Thank you so much. Speaking of support, I want to take a quick second to thank all of the supporters here. Starting with our elite partner, Javier Lazaron, that is the highest tier of subscription over on YouTube memberships and Patreon. Followed by our partners, Gobaldi's Inc. and Matt Oscard. That is the next tier of subscription there. Followed by, finally, everybody else listed here under the supporters section, which is a combination of the other tiers of support under YouTube memberships, Patreon, as well as Twitch subscriptions. So thank you all very much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. And it helps me offset costs of running this channel, like hosting fees, software licenses, eventually probably some assets, things like that. So it is very, very much appreciated. Yeah, Smudge, your timing was perfect. That was awesome. Good stuff. I found your channel, by the way. I wasn't aware that you were streaming, so I gave you a follow. All right. All that being said, like I said, we're gonna take a look at texture assets tonight, and we're also probably gonna do both texture assets as well as take a look at how texture resources are handled, and rework the resource aspect of that into the texture system and sort of eliminate texture resources in general. So that's kind of what's on the roster for tonight. I don't know how far we'll get, but that's the plan anyway. Magetsup, good to see you. How are you? All right, so let me see. Let me just split the view here for a second and let's check out the header file. I don't remember if, yeah, we did do the header implementation here. Okay, so what I'm essentially going to do is, actually, I think I'm going to probably just do this sort of layout thing for all of our different types of assets. All right, so what I'm going to do is we're going to essentially take this same set of functions and we are going to duplicate all of that for textures, right? And the reason I'm choosing textures now is because it kind of reaches into a bunch of different systems and things. This is probably going to be one of the wider reaching asset resource refactors. So I want to go ahead and get that knocked out first. And then I think probably the next one after that might be it's somewhere between shaders and static meshes, I want to say. It's probably going to be the next one. So this one's definitely going to touch the most systems. So I think it's prudent to go ahead and handle this one now. So that being said, we do have our types, right? So we have our k-asset binary, which I think we had gone ahead and removed sort of the k-asset sub base class out of that, or rather a base structure, I should say. And so we're going to do the same thing. Let's see. I guess we should probably do... Should I mark these in code somehow that I've done them? I guess we don't really have to do that. We could go by whether or not there's still a base there, right? So let's see. We have the next one's actually going to be images. Now that you think about it, it's not textures, it's images, right? Because we're talking about the asset level. So do we have one of these for images? I'm pretty sure that we do. Here we go. So K asset image right here. Okay. So when we did binary, I believe all we did was actually remove the base from that. So I'm essentially going to do the same thing here. I'm going to remove base from that. Width and height, I think those are fine as U32s. I don't see any reason to change that. Channel count is fine. MIP levels. Does MIP levels make sense? I guess we could have MIP levels. We could have pre-baked MIP maps, right? So I guess that does kind of make sense. Then we have the image format, which I think is fine. And then pixel array size, which is the size of the pixel array, and then the pixels themselves. So I think this is fine. So we do still have limited image formats. We'll eventually be extending this as well. For now, I think that works. The import options thing, the import options is going to go away. That's just going to be, that I think is just going to be part of our external importer once we externalize that. Let's see. LaFoley, good to see you. Spiro, how's it going? 7th or something. Yeah. Congrats, buddy. Thank you for showing up, though. I appreciate it. Let's see. Since I got my game engine running natively on Wayland, I noticed that some apps just plain out crash. Today, I figured out something to do with defaulting to first in, first out swap chain presentation mode. Guess there has to be some external syncing going on. That depends. I haven't run into that issue, actually. And I've used FIFO before, so that may be like a driver issue or something else you're running into, Miguets. Diamond, good to see you. No depth, you're not supporting 3D textures arrays. So, that is a solid point. Because before, the way that we'd always kind of handled this was if we had an arrayed texture. Well, let's put it this way. If we had an arrayed texture, right, we didn't have one single asset for that. We loaded multiple assets and sort of fed that into layers. Same with cube maps, right, which are basically kind of like the same thing. And I suppose there's an argument that we could extend this to also support 3D, right? So it's either between that or, now that I'm actually thinking about it, maybe we have an asset image 2D and an asset image 3D. Because 90% of the time we're not going to be dealing with 3D, right? And so in just kind of thinking about that, we would always have this sort of depth property that would exist alongside these two for images that just aren't going to use them. I mean, otherwise these are kind of the same, right? Although you could also argue, I feel like adding depth there for like the 99% of textures not using that is just kind of a waste of space. I feel like we ought to do the 2D, 3D route and just have them be separate types of assets if we support that, right? So maybe in the future, if we wanted to load a 3D image asset, we could do that. But we also don't have the capability to import those right now either. So maybe I'll do that as a to-do. Battle Gnome, first time chatter, welcome. Could have KS at volume. Volume has a different meaning in the engine, though. So I don't know that I want to go that way. Question, why do you not return... Wait, why do you not check if your kallocate returns null? Because kallocate has a allocator behind it that is written that if it fails, we'll know before we get to this point. So I don't actually have to do it at this level. Interesting music, yeah. Yeah, it's just what I kind of... It's part of a playlist that I have going of just game-centric music that I like. Texture arrays are way underrated, though. So useful. Yes, they are. In fact, we're going to be using them heavily for terrains, right? But importing them as a single asset... Do we need to do that? I don't know. You're subbed. When did this happen? I think it was when Spiro gave away a bunch of gift subs. 2 streams ago. Yeah. Because Spiro gave a bunch of them away. Which was really awesome of him. But yeah, I think that's probably... that's probably where it came from. Speaking of which, he's on a 7-stream streak. Appreciate that, Spiro. Have you considered DDS formats for textures? Yes, I have. I just haven't added it yet, frankly. And that's going to be an import, right? So we'll be able to import DDS as well. There's a couple of things that I want to add in terms of textures. KTX is another one of them. I feel like I've only ever watched your VODs, caught you like once live. Well, I appreciate that and welcome. Glad to have you here. Okay. So maybe, just in thinking about this, right? Maybe we have... Because I guess, you know, this is kind of a good time to think about it, right? Maybe we do that, and then we also have, like, 2D. Oops. $3D doesn't necessarily make sense either, though. Well, maybe it does. Because we could just do that, right? Do I support QoA format? Not yet, no. It's on the list of to-dos. Why not just have the depth field? Yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking about. Like 90% of the time, 95, 99% of the time, we're going to be dealing with 2D images, right? So we'll potentially have hundreds of these images loaded with a depth property that's just never used. 2D textures just have a depth of 1. Yeah, that's true. But, you know, I don't know. I'm kind of torn on which way to go, to be honest. I suppose we could just combine them. I just hate the idea of having, like, this extra property in there all the time. That's just almost never used. But I guess it's not the end of the world. I think I'm overthinking it. We'll just go this way for now. I think that's fine. We don't support this anyways right now at the asset level. That's something we do need to add, but we don't support it yet. That's probably going to be super useful for when we want to build like terrain textures, which will make heavy use of texture arrays, but could the depth in 2D be used for layering? But then it becomes kind of a 3D texture, right? Like 3D textures and layered textures are kind of on the surface the same thing. internally, obviously, they're not, but because I could also use this for like if we ever had like a cube map, single cube map texture that was like layered. So in this case, if you're thinking in Vulkan terms, this would essentially be the layer count. Right, so you have width and height, which is obviously your image's width and height, right? And then this would be how many layers you have. So, I could do something stupid like, have a smaller like U16 or something like that, because I doubt you'll have something that's that deep as a texture, but like, I don't know. Does the version of C you're using support anonymous unions? Could do a union depth layers. Yeah, I mean, that's easy enough. Yeah. I did switch to C99. I'm only using one GNU extension, so technically it's GNU C99. But yeah, it does support that. Array text samples from a single layer, but a 3D texture. So remember the important distinction here is this is not a texture, right? This is just an image. So this could be used in a lot of different ways, right? So like for a cube map, for instance, you might have 6 layers, which would be your depth, right? And then you'd have your width and height for each side of the box. Yeah, so this is just loading it from disk, because there's multiple things that an image can be used for. So I want to keep that concept there, right? And then by the time we get to the texture system is actually going to know how this image asset is used, and then therefore can interpret the depth to mean whatever it needs to mean. Let's see. I was wondering where the GPU reference ID was. Texture system would be where you do all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, so, and also the GPU reference ID stuff is all in the texture structure. Yeah. Honestly, I think until you implement the usage of 3D images, there's no point in having it. You might end up needing something completely different. Yeah, and that's kind of the way I was thinking. I'm just trying to think, like, I'm pretty sure I can't think of a reason why we would treat this any different, right? So we would have width and height, and then essentially layers. That's always essentially what it's going to be, no matter what we have, whether it's a cube map, or whether it's an actual 3D texture of some sort with like layered images. So I think maybe we could probably just add this. Now our importer is not going to do anything with this at the moment. It's going to completely ignore it. But we could have it here, and always just default it to 1 whenever we read stuff in with a to-do to say maybe we adjust that later. I think that makes sense. That's what I'm going to try. We're going to try that. We'll see how far that goes. All right. All right, so let's go back. And we're going to talk about texture assets here in the header. So this is going to be image, ksset image loaded callback. And this is going to take a image asset. I think that makes sense. Okay, and then these are going to be all images. And then these are all going to be images as well. And then, let's see. We'll come back to the callback in just a second. I just want to hit this guy here once. All right, so we do need image there as well, so that we point to the, or we use the correct function pointer. Now, when we do an image load, there are a couple of other things that we have to potentially keep in mind. Where do I put these? I guess I could probably put them, after the callback. No, I think the callback should be at the end. So one thing that we need to think about is, do we want to invert the y-axis, right? Because images are kind of stored upside down. In some cases, we may want to invert that. In some cases, we may not want to. So whenever we read this, we need to know, do we want to invert that, right? Or maybe I should say flip y. Do we want to flip the image on the y-axis? So I guess we'll put that after name. In all cases, I guess. So let's just do right here. Oops, did I not? There we go. So package name. And then name, right? Oh, this also needs to be image. Okay, I think that makes sense, right? And this is one of the reasons we want to have different functions for this, right? That way we don't have like this separate structure that we have to fill out and pass in. Like, it's just wherever we call this from, we just pass it what it needs to know, and then that's that. Yeah, that's true internal static for sure. We don't talk about VS here very much, and if we do, we have to bleep it out. Meyer TV, how's it going? I am doing well. How about you? Okay, I think. Oh, this says release binary. This should be release image. Okay. This, I believe, should be everything we need. We could arguably load images in a specific format, although I think the format probably ought to be read from the image asset itself, so maybe we won't add that as like an import option. All right, so let's take this. And we'll go back over here. We'll come down here to the end. And let me grab this guy as well. And let's see, we have, I don't need this type def there. We don't need these exports. Okay. So I guess the easiest thing here to do is the release first. So I'm actually just going to take a copy of this because it's mostly the same. And instead of content, it's going to be pixel array size and pixels. Let's see. What about Rust? Rust isn't a cuss word on this stream yet, although it could be close. It's questionable. Are you thinking of the Pigeon Messenger guy? Does he treat that as a cuss word? Confusing your C programmers. That's fair enough. Thank you for the follow, by the way. Prep before bed. Tired from almost no sleep. Day. I wish I could manage deadlines in a sane way. Pfft, I hear that. 100% heard. I'm a mod. I could make Rust a cuss word. That's true. It's true, Spiro. But then I would also have to bleep it. Flask, how's it going? Good to see you. Welcome. I mean, you know, I'd have to do that whenever I say it. Maybe I should do like a poll or something. How the heck do you do a poll in here? I've never actually done one. Here we go. Let's create a new poll. Should Rust become a should it become a curse word on this stream? Let's see. We'll leave it going for a minute. There we go. Poll is out. There we go. Dr. Elliott, good to see you. How's it going? Memory safe should be a cuss word too. I love it. I'm not mad at it. It's very trolly. I like that. I especially like that it's not capitalized. Yeah. Can't be having that. I can't decide which choice to make. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's either yes or yes. Let's see. So the answer is yes. Go figure. Surprise, surprise. The second yes actually meant no in this case, but yeah. I thought it'd be funny to type yes in there twice. But yeah, that means it is now a cuss word. So now, whenever we talk about that, I have to say... I'm totally going to forget that at some point. Definitely going to bollocks that. All right. I believe the only thing that we actually need to fix here... Yeah, the only thing that we actually care about freeing is going to be this pixels array. So we'll do pixels and pixel array size. And we'll leave that memory tag as it is. And then we're going to free the asset itself, which is going to be the size of a k-asset image. Okay. Just like we did up above, the async requests are going to feed into, or going to call the synchronous requests. And then we will be able to jobify that within the VFS later on, right? So let's see. Request binary and request binary. Wait. Yeah, these forward on rather. I'm sorry, not the synchronous version. The from package is what they forward on to. So we can do return asset system request image from package. We'll do states Package name is going to be state application package name string. And then we'll use name, flip y, listener, and callback. And then this guy is basically going to be the same, minus listener and callback. And then this needs to just be from package sync. Thank you for the follows, by the way. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've actually looked at GF, or GF2, I should say, Magets. It's not quite as quick and easy to use as the editor that we shall not name. That debugger is still better. I'm waiting for Rad Debugger to be available on Linux, and I might just try that out and switch to it if it's good. I've heard good things about it. What about borrow checker? I mean, I suppose, but the problem is like if we add too many things to the list, I'm gonna completely always get it wrong, and then we can't have that. Or the stream is gonna be nothing but, you know, this all the time. Like the entire stream will just eventually wind up being that. We'll just keep adding things to the list. Like the word it. Fork it and rename it Voldemort. That's very funny. Qt Creator has a nice debugger too. Never use it. So that I don't know. I am looking to get away from like full IDEs, right? So I don't know. It's snappy? Okay. Yeah, because I was going to say, I don't know how heavy that is. I've never actually used it, so... Yeah, I mean, if it's decent, I can use it, but, you know, it needs to be easy to use, easy to set breakpoints, easy to, you know, examine values, easy to examine memory. Okay. Yeah, I could give that a shot. Do you not use GDB? I have, but I'm not an expert with it. Maybe that's what I need to do. That might be the entire problem, internal static void. I might just need to learn GDB. I did learn Vim because, you know, I heard so many good things about it, and it ruined all other editors for me too. Whenever I have to use another editor, I'm constantly hitting Vim shortcuts, and it doesn't work. But yeah, so maybe it's the same thing. Maybe I just need to, you know, devote some time to learning to really use GDB to, you know, learn the depths of it, as it were. Do you use Lazy for NeoVim? I do not. No, I have my own custom config. In fact, there it is. There's a link to it. That's a link to an article that describes my NeoVim config. And then it has a link to my actual config, which might be slightly out of date from what I'm using, but it's like 99% there. GDB is not as hard as you think. It takes a second to get used to, but holy moly, it's so powerful. Yeah, and I mean, GDB is what powers, well, here. So this debugger here is actually run on top of GDB. So yeah. Qt Creator has fake Vim mode. Yeah, I wouldn't, but see, that's the thing, is like I would not code in Qt Creator. Like as far as my editor's concerned, Vim is it for me. Let's see. Basic commands break. Yeah, I'm familiar with that one, but yeah. Use Packer instead of Lazy. Yeah, exactly. Yep, Packer is pretty good, I think. Used Vim for a bit, didn't shake my world. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just, the navigation of text is just so much better. And I love not having to reach for the mouse every 2 seconds. Although I do on stream because I need to highlight things and it's a little easier to just kind of do this when I'm talking about a section of code. But when I'm writing sort of off stream, I don't really use the mouse much. Yeah, so definitely, I should definitely look into GDB. It's been on my bucket list of things to do. It's just I haven't gotten around to it. And also, I'm not at a point where I can actually run or debug any of this code yet. It's going to be a bit before we actually hit that. Layout source, I'm going to butcher the explanation, but show the code of what you're doing, what you're debugging on. It's not as hard as you think since you're comfortable with Vim already. Okay, yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, so Rad Debugger, Lafoli, is what you're talking about. And that is actually one of the ones I'm really interested in trying once he gets, the Linux version of it working. Because I don't want to have to go back to Windows. At least not on purpose. There's a graphical debugger for NeoVim too. Yeah, so it works in much the same way as this one does. Only I have found it to not be quite as good in terms of updating the UI. It tends to be out of date, especially when dealing with multi-threaded applications. At least it was when I tried it a couple years ago. I had lots of problems and issues with it, so I wound up turning it off. It was what was it? What was it called? I can't remember what it was called, but yeah, I'm familiar with the one you're talking about. Yeah, it essentially used the same debugger under the hood that this does, but its UI updating wasn't all that great. Maybe I'll try it again one of these days. Galactic Past, good to see you over there on the YouTube side. How's it going? Convinced me to switch from GF2 to the editor that shall not be named. Yeah, I know. Like, I tried GF2 for a while, and I don't know. It wasn't quite there for me. How's your lightweight Vim replacement coming along? I haven't worked on it in a couple months, but you're talking about Notepad minus minus. Yeah, it is still under construction, but yeah, I haven't had time to work on it. I'm actually thinking about maybe picking that up again sometime soon. Why not try using Vim with the new Windows terminal? I use it like that, and I didn't notice much of a difference compared to Linux. I mean, I have done. That's actually what I do when I'm programming in Windows. But in terms of, I just like working on Linux better. I even like working on Mac OS better than Windows, for sure. Compilation speed, for one thing, is a hell of a lot faster, just because there's issues at the file system level with Windows and how it deals with files that you're kind of limited as to how fast you can compile when things are split out into different files. It'll only compile so fast, and that doesn't matter whether you're using the full Visual Studio or not. But yeah. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome. When you get to a debugging point, if I'm in chat, I'll give the rundown on GDB. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's one of those things I just need to sit down and go through it. Legitimately different beast, yeah. Deleted my Windows partition today. I can't quite do that because I've got, I obviously have to support Kohi, right, on Windows, because I'm sure that most people are probably going to wind up using it on Windows. But also, I have some games that don't quite run well on Linux yet. So, oh, you deleted Grub in the process? Oof. Been there, done that. All right. So, I guess I think like before we'll do the sync version and then we'll do the async version. And actually, I think we can actually do we can actually copy a lot of this stuff, right? Because the overall concept's the same. It's just what we have to what we're dealing with in terms of data is different, right? So we have image, and then this is going to be image again. And then we have asset name, package name, get source. So we're not going to do any get source on this stuff. In fact, get source might be going away in the near future because I want to change the way that that asset imports are handled. So we might be getting rid of that entirely as well. This is a binary asset. We do not want to watch for hot reload. And then we request the asset from the VFS. Okay, so that's fine. This needs to be pixel array size. And I think, you know what? This is going to be, I'm going to have to look at the image asset handler. I think we need the deserialize here. Binary image serializer. I suppose we could probably actually just use this. So we have binary image header. So the way that this works is we do have this binary image header that contains top level information, right? Like the format, image width and height, MIP levels, and then some padding used to keep, the structure aligned to 32 bits. Let's see, do we have... We have typed asset. So where does this come in for asset data? I think I think all we use is asset data bytes and size. And then we pass through the context asset. Okay, so I guess we could just use this. Right, so we can do B8 result equals binary image deserialize. The size is going to be the, let's see, data size. The block is going to be data bytes. And then the out asset is just going to be out asset. Why is this bleating? Oh, it just wants a K asset. Okay. So we'll have to change this serializer to deal with the casted version of this. Do we want to, should I maybe rewrite this? Because this serializer is in runtime, which is also going to be a problem when we go to externalize our tooling for imports. So, the way that I'm envisioning this working, we have over here, if we go down here to Kohi, we have core, right, which is kind of our base library that contains a lot of our core functionality that can not only be used for the engine or the application, but also tooling. So like things like our memory management, our string libraries, our math types, things like that. But also assets are in here, right? And specifically some of our asset utilities, right? And some of our asset handler types. And so what I'm thinking is, since our asset types are in here, maybe we move these serializers, which are currently down here in runtime. They are under assets, handlers. Wait. Where did I put those? There's a couple things I think we should probably move around, actually, now that I'm looking at it. So our handler is here. Oh, the serializer is in core already. My bad. Why did I think that was in runtime? All right, so all these asset handlers are going to go away. They are going to be replaced by the code in our asset system. We're just going to do all of this in our asset system directly instead of handling it separately. With the exception of our serializers, right? So our serializers will live here. I think that makes sense to keep these separate because our tooling is going to need to know how to access these things. So like we have our binary image serializer, and a couple of other serializers, right? So this is what is responsible for translating between the asset structure and the asset that actually gets written to disk into that huge binary blob of data. And so we still need that translation layer no matter what we do. And I think this is the proper place for that to live. The only difference is these are kind of designed with a more generic interface in mind, which we no longer need. So if I take a look at this, right, our binary image serialize, right, just takes a generic K asset, which is not necessarily what we should be doing. And so what this really should take is a K asset image, right, the specific type. And then this also should be a K asset image. Oops. Right. That way we don't have to like worry about all the different types and doing enum checks and that kind of stuff. It only just takes the type of asset that we're actually expecting. I heard a couple of dings over here. Let me check and see what's going on. Okay, got a couple of... looks like we have a raid. Oh, thank you so much for the raid, Nan. How's it going? How are you doing? What'd you get up to on stream? Welcome, raiders. Sorry, I was kind of deep in thought there for a second. Thank you so much for the raid. I really appreciate that. Spiro, thanks for giving the shout out there. Appreciate that. Okay. Orshi, good to see you. Kathane, how's it going? First time chatter, welcome. Let's see. catch up with some additional messages here. Looks like Push Toy, good to see you. I'm going to sleep. Hope to see your art sometime. Just chatting away. Yeah. I'm actually hoping to get started on art soon. I still have several programming tasks that I'm working on, but yeah, hopefully we can actually get started on some art before too much longer. It's still probably going to be a couple months at least of coding stuff, but yeah, at some point we're going to be like heavy art on the channel for sure. But yeah, thank you again so much for the raid. Big shout out to Non-Codes over there. If you're not following her, you definitely should be. For those of you who are new here, I'll give the quick and dirty intro as to what the heck we're doing. We are making something called the Kohi game engine, and I'll go ahead and drop a link in chat. The entire thing that we're doing here is we're building a game engine from scratch in C using Vulkan as our initial rendering backend. I say initial rendering backend because we do have plans to support Metal and Direct3D as well at a minimum. The engine itself is open source and free, runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS desktop environments. And like I mentioned, it is free and open source, so there is a GitHub link in there as well. It's Apache 2.0 license, which means you can use it for whatever you want, commercial or independent. Independent's not the word I want. Personal projects. It does not matter. All that I ask is that, if you use it, just say you use it. Credit, right? So there will never be any sort of licensing fees or royalties of any kind ever. The reason for that is because this is it's a game engine built almost entirely on camera. We started as a YouTube series, like a tutorial type of thing, and now we're streaming on Twitch and YouTube, right? And so the entire idea behind this is that it was an educational series, right? And we are exploring a way to build a game engine. It's not the only way to build a game engine. It's not even necessarily always the right way to build a game engine. We do a lot of experimentation on here, trying different things. Sometimes we try things that I know deliberately won't work, so that we can go into a deep dive on why that doesn't work. And so we do a lot of exploration on here in terms of trying different things. Some of that stuff works out, some of it doesn't. And we always kind of try to do a little bit of a post-mortem on those things as we go through them. So there's that. If you go onto this page here, we've got YouTube and Twitch links, a link to our Discord that's got over 1,000 people on it now, a GitHub link to this project here, and then a Patreon link. So I don't have any sort of sponsors. I don't have anything. All I've got is you guys, right? So that is basically the gist of it. And right now we are actually working on a little bit of a refactor of our asset system. We're actually working on making the API for it a lot easier to use. We're tightening up our code, and we're actually going to get ready to delete a lot of code here shortly. So this whole change that I'm making to the asset system and our resources is in an effort to simplify our code and make it more robust while also deleting a lot of logic. So let's see. All right, that is the spiel. What kind of witchcraft is this? I don't recognize the syntax. This is C. Yeah. Let's see. Sergeant Pepper, good to see you. How's it going? I hope you're doing well. Sergeant Pepper is asking, bindings when? We can't say that word on the stream. We had a poll earlier, and it was decided that the term it's illegal now on this stream. We can't say it, right? It's been outlawed. Would you be mad if I remake the build system for Kohi and Zig and make a PR? So I would say feel free to fork it, right? But the whole idea, one of the whole ideas of this as well, and I forgot to kind of mention this, we build all this stuff from scratch, and what we want to do is we want to eliminate as many dependencies as we possibly can. And I'm actually in the process of eliminating more dependencies, because really all we want to have as a dependency when we build this is a C compiler and Vulkan, right? Or DirectX, SDK, or Metal, right? But like we want to keep the we don't use any third-party libraries except maybe some for imports. But in the core runtime of the engine, we don't use any of that stuff. And so I definitely don't want to, we don't use any fancy build systems either. Right now we do use Make. I'm going to be eliminating that as well in the near future. So yeah, I wouldn't say make a PR, but yeah, if you wanted to port it to Zig, go for it. Did a poll earlier. It's now a cuss word that must be bleeped. Use that word around here at risk. Spiro. It's a double offense if you capitalize it. Yes, definitely. Unfollowed. The poll was 100% yes vote. Unanimous. Yeah, it was, actually. I'm going to have to bleep this again, but APIs be like, honey, you haven't filled in your daily interfaces. Yes, compiler. It's very funny, Magets. What are you going to use over Make? We are going to write our own build system in C, similar to what Soding has done. Meant more Zig as a C compiler, but I mostly meant it as a joke. Rather than saying, oh, I mean, probably would just work, actually. Last time I tried GCC, I know it worked. Sounds a lot like Soding's philosophy with no build. Yeah, that's exactly, yep. It's exactly what it's based on. So I want to build something like that, obviously. I don't know that I'm going to follow the exact way that he did it or not. But I'm going to try and keep... Well, no, I know I'm not going to follow the exact way he did it. Because he has a lot of OS-specific code like mixed directly into the code base. And I want to keep that clean and separate, right? But yeah, we'll figure that out. I already actually have... And I'm not going to go over it now, but right here, I already have a K build in here. So once I have that to a point where it's usable, we're going to switch to that. Let's see. Is it bad that I got banned from Soding's chat like 6 years ago? For the life of me, I do not know why. When I sent an unban request and asked why it was, because I was banned in like 2018 and he didn't at least tell me why I was banned. Dang. That sucks. Ew, OS code and code base, no thanks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I want to try and avoid that, right? So, any way that we can avoid that, I'm going to. All right. Singy, how's it going there over on the YouTube side? I hope you're doing well. Let's see. When will you add support for Wayland? So that is on my to-do list. We do have support for it via X Wayland, which is actually, I'm running on Wayland right now. So this does work just fine on this. But yeah, at some point I'm going to support that. Because the platform layer on this engine is pretty solid. So let's see. Okay, I just saw a link in there to cargo-vibe, and I'm not going to click it because I don't want to throw up on stream. You're streaming on YouTube too? Yes, I simulcast to both. Yep. All right. So let's see. Instead of calling this binary image serialize, I'm just going to call this k-asset image serialize and deserialize. Allocates memory that should be freed by the caller. That is true. Okay. So that's fine on that level. I probably got to rename the file too, if I'm honest. Let's do a rename on this guy. So we're going to just call this kasset image serializer. The binary was there because we also had a image, like an import serializer before, but we don't have that anymore. So we don't really need to keep that naming in here. That's kind of a legacy thing. So we can get rid of that too. All right, and then over here, let's use the C file. We'll go here and do that. All right, so binary image header. I think this is fine to leave like it is. We are going to have to change. Yeah, I did rename those there. So we are going to just have to do a quick rename on these guys, because this is just kasset image serialize and deserialize now. What is this bleating about? Conflicting types. Did we not? Oh, probably because of the asset type. That is why. Wow. Bollocks that, didn't I? Okay. Little dingus-oriented programming there for you tonight. Okay, so now we don't need not serialize without an asset, you dingus. We need that. The asset type. So if we are serializing this, we actually don't need to check the asset type anymore. In fact, the asset type doesn't even exist on there, so we can get rid of that. And then all of this type asset business we don't need anymore. It's just going to be asset now. So that's going to be, oops, just asset. Okay, so header base type. I guess we do need, I think we could just do this. We'll just hard code it, right? Because we're always going to be dealing with assets, right? With image assets here, rather, I should say. So this is going to be just asset. This is going to be just assets, and so we have pixels and pixel array size. And I think that's actually it for that one. And then we just have to handle the deserialize, which is really the one we're interested in now. Okay, so header base type should be image. Okay, those checks are fine to leave in there. All of that's fine to leave in here. I think the only thing we actually have to get rid of, and we actually have, so we had this concept of meta and versions, right? With our assets, and that was in sort of the base, right? So we don't need type, but the version I think might be actually useful because right now in version 1 of the image asset format, we only support just like raw RGBA. We don't have any compression or anything. When we get ready to write our compression algorithms or decide on an algorithm, we're going to have to add that to this serializer, right? And when we get ready to do that, we're going to have to obviously check the version to see if that's even supported, right? Because what we might have is like an old asset that is version 1 that we import, and then maybe we want to export it to a version 2 that's maybe compressed or something. So let's see, version is just a U32, so I think we probably ought to go ahead and add. We probably ought to go ahead and add that in here. Just so that we have that. You know what, a U32 is kind of excessive for that, though, I think. Let's reduce that to like a U8, right? We're not going to have anything larger than that. And I'm going to move this down. And then what we'll do is the header base version, binary asset header. It is a U32 as far as the asset's concerned, and I guess that's fine. We'll just do a cold cast here, right? And that's how we'll get around that. All right. So that should be it for the image serializer. So this will take in, let's see, this will actually handle the deserialization here. So out asset, this is binary k-asset image deserialize. We need to make sure we have the right include up here and get rid of the old include. Right? Okay, so here's the deserialize. So we don't actually need to do any of that, right? This is going to handle it for us. So I guess, I suppose we could output an error message, right? So we'll do if not result. Failed to deserialize image asset. See logs for details. And then we can just do, well, actually, in this error scenario, we probably want to actually do want to do a k free, and then we want the block to be data, or no, out asset, right? And then we can return 0. Otherwise, we return out asset. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome. You often practice doofus-oriented shenanigans. DOS. I like that. Download the book Dingus-Oriented Programming Explained. Dope. Ooh, Flask. I like that a lot. I'm copying that. And I'll give you credit. I'll give you credit if I wind up doing something with it. That's hilarious. I love it. Let's see. Dingus-oriented programming. Yeah, so Dingus-oriented programming has become a bit of a meme on the stream, right? It's basically whenever I screw something up or do something stupid on screen, make a stupid mistake or something like that, I just call that Dingus-oriented programming. DOP. Is that Game of Thrones music in the background? It might have been. I don't know which one. How far are we into the list here? It might have been at some point. It's entirely possible. As an alternative, I have the version be part of the file, but when I read it, I just check it against the global constant attached to the struct rather than having the version on the image itself. You make a good point, actually. Because the only reason we would ever need the asset version to be tracked on the image, the only reason we'd ever need to keep that would be if the image needed to be exported again. Because when we decode the asset, right now it's just reading in a stream of bytes, right, for RGBA. But when we read the asset data in, the pixel data in, we would probably want to do the decoding at that time. So yes, you're correct. We don't need to store it there. Good call. We can get rid of that. Because when we go to write it out, we will know what the current version is, right? So if we go back in here, this is probably going to bleat at us now. And that is okay. So we don't need... So I guess we could do, this, and then say if version is equal or greater than 1, invalid image asset version, version whatever is newer or is higher than the current version, you dingus. Return false. Right? And then instead of having a hard-coded 1 there, yeah, we probably have just, image asset current version 1. Right, and so that would be that, I think is what you're talking about. Because I assume you're not going to want to load images of different versions without porting. Yeah, so I guess by the time it becomes an asset that's usable by a system, version won't really matter. Because version is really just a construct of what the file format itself can hold or represent. And by the time we've actually decoded that data, we're just dealing with raw pixel data anyway, so I don't think it actually matters. Raw QOV, how's it going? First time chatter, welcome. But if there's a version mismatch on deserialize, you would re-encode it right there. So, and change the version. So if, for now I'm just going to do this, right? Because we don't actually have anything to like differentiate on in terms of decoding or file capabilities or anything. I'm just going to check, hey, is the version greater than something that's currently supported, and slap the user if it is. Because that means they're screwing with the file. In the future, we could maybe do some stuff to change this, but I think for now I'm just going to throw an error. If you read the Quake 3 source code, currently checking out, curious how their design decision for client-server architecture they implemented. Be cool for single-player games as well. So yeah, that's actually, given the time that came out, that was a very popular model of writing game engines. So the Torque game engine did the same thing back in the day. Even though a lot of times you were creating a single-player game, there was still this client-server architecture that was there, which was pretty cool. It made translating it to a multiplayer online game easier. For our purposes here, it's overkill because I'm not going to have online features, but maybe Kohi version 2 would have that. But yeah, I've seen that in other engines as well, and it's kind of a neat thing to have. Yeah, for now, just error it. That's what I do as well. Yeah, exactly. Only change the version when I add or remove fields. Exactly. Yep. What is magic? So, you're talking about this. This is a specific number that I insert into the first 4 bytes of the file. that marks it as a Kohi asset. So it's a magic number. That's why I call it magic. And it is literally 0x Cafe Babe. We actually have a U64 version of that as well, although I haven't really used it. But this is the 32-bit version, right? So we have the first 4 bytes of the file. For binary files, whenever we export them, we always put this here. And that allows us to look at the very beginning of the file and say, if that magic number doesn't line up, then we're not dealing with a binary asset here. So yeah, that's just kind of, there's all kinds of those. There's like dead beef and other words that you can make out of hex, right? But that's just the one I chose. Sergeant Pepper used to use 0x Kaka Cafe. That's very funny. My magic is literally just the words fracture, my game engine name. Luckily, it's 8 bytes. Yeah, so I guess that makes sense. That's another way to do it, for sure. This is just the way that I chose, and it works pretty well, I think. It's just a quick and convenient way to immediately say this is or is not a Kohi binary asset. So, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome. Okay, so that's the deserialize. So actually, that is all we're gonna have to do for that. This will give us everything we need to load a binary image from disk, right? And that's gonna be a KBI file, right? So that's an image that's already been imported. So that's the synchronous version. The asynchronous version is this guy here, which operates a little differently. So what we're going to do is the same thing as we did before. So we're going to use this sort of structure here. Oops. If I can hit the right dingus key binding. All right, so I'm going to copy pasta this and throw this down here. And then we are going to go ahead and let's see. I just thought about something now. Flip Y was a import option before. And here, it's a little bit more than an import option, right? It's actually like, we'd have to actually modify the data. Okay, so that might be something we have to look at some point. We need to rethink that, actually. We'll come back to that. All right, so let's get this written first, and then we'll come back to the flip idea and think about how we want to put that in. Okay, so we have binary VFS context. Okay, so we're going to need a new structure for that. So I'm going to grab this and come down here and we are going to say this is going to be an image, and then image VFS context. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. As a non-game dev, what all does a game engine provide to the game developer? So in the sense of generically speaking, right, the game engine is it's a couple of things. It provides the core runtime components that you're going to need to actually build a game on top of. So it provides all of your APIs to create your graphics, run your sound, handle your physics, set up your scene, set up your UI. It gives you all of those systems to kind of build your game logic on top of. But it's also a tool chain. So it gives you like a level editor, asset importers, and converters from different formats. Like a UI editor, debugging tools, all kinds of stuff like that. So like a game engine is kind of I always define it as like a suite of tools that you build a game on top of, but it's also it's also kind of a library that you build on top of as well, right? And so it gives you all of that stuff so that you can just focus on writing the actual game specific logic and not have to worry about rewriting your render code from scratch every time. It is a lot of stuff, yeah. And we're doing it all from scratch, probably because I hate myself, I guess. But no, I'm just kidding. It's been a lot of fun to actually roll all this stuff from scratch for sure. Who knows the name of this NeoVim color scheme, or is custom one? This is, I want to say, it's Adwaita or GitHub Dark. But what I will do, there is a link to an article that describes my entire NeoVim setup, as well as a link to configuration. So the configuration is probably 99% accurate to what I have here. I think I've made a couple small tweaks, but nothing large. But yeah, that should answer pretty much any question you've got about how I have this set up. All right. Now, we need to modify these a little bit. So this is going to be image loaded callback, and then we want a image asset here. And then down here, we need to change this to, oops. Let's see, what are we missing here? Context callback. This because this is the wrong context. Image. This should be image. Oops. That should be image. This should be image. This is going to be placed by image as well. Now I could do a find and replace on this, right? But I feel like that's a little more risky. I always feel like it's a little bit better to just kind of step through line by line and fix it, right? Okay, so we're going to default to the application package name. This is really just going to, let's see, is binary is true. Okay, here's another one. An image asset loaded callback. Did we not have, I thought I put that. Didn't I put that in the, oh, this is the, this is the VFS callback. That's right. I forgot about that. Okay. So I actually need this guy as well. We need to fill out one of these. Let's put that here. So what this is this is the callback that the asynchronous function is going to make. And it is going to use the image specific stuff, which really is just handling everything that our synchronous function did here, right? So this stuff, instead of manually modifying all this stuff, we have that there. This needs to be changed to image, okay? And then what is data? Oh, this should be asset data. Dot. Is it not? Yeah, size. I thought so. Asset data size, asset data bytes. Okay. Okay, so if we fail here, there's not really much to do about it from this point. We're just going to basically have to write an error out. And then we free the context. Okay, so this function gets called once the asset is loaded from disk. That's an asynchronous operation at this point. So we pass it here. So you'll note the difference between this request info and this request info is, wait a minute, this is, where is it? Did we not? I thought I specified. I think I specified, yes, request asset sync versus request asset, right? So this is the asynchronous version, this is the synchronous version. So the asynchronous version does not actually return an asset, right? Which is the reason we need the callback. We essentially set up a context like this that we pass through that has a pointer to the asset, the function pointer, and a listener object that is passed in here. This request is made asynchronously. It is passed a callback to make once this whole thing is loaded, and then it passes this context along with that callback. And then this function here then picks that up, deserializes it, sets the data in, let's see, out asset, there it is, and then cleans up the context, right? So, with all that, are we missing anything here? I don't believe we are. I think these other areas, these other errors are from stuff that we've set up previously that we still need to rip out of the old system. Okay. So that's actually everything for loading. Oops, this should be image. That's confusing. This should be image assets, and I did the same thing here. Okay. So that's all there is to image assets, actually. It's not terribly complicated at all. Internal static, have a good one. I get it. I'm not too far behind you, to be completely honest. Let's see. How are you planning events? How'd you handle events? Would be a better way to phrase the question. Okay, so if you're talking about events in the engine, we already have an event system. So our event system is basically like it's like a pub sub essentially, at least for right now. We might have something a little bit more advanced like broadcasting or something eventually, but for now it's just a simple pub sub. And you have essentially codes and a context that get passed along with it. Yeah, so okay, so you're talking about like the OOP sort of way of doing game programming, which we may or may not wind up doing here. I don't think we're going to wind up doing too much of that. Maybe in our game code we might have a little bit, but like, you know, we're going to try and avoid, you know, too much passing around of events and stuff like that in too much of a generic way in our game code. We're going to try and be explicit and specific wherever we can be, just to eliminate any sort of overhead or complication in code, right? Events are handled by registering callbacks of the system by providing which event as an enum value and then a function pointer callback. Yeah, I couldn't have worded it better myself. Yeah, so literally, like this is an event context, right? It's just a large union of a bunch of different types. And then you have a register here where you pass a code, which is one of these guys, right? Or, I mean, it technically could be anything, but we have a bunch of predefined codes here. And so you pass through a code, a listener, and then a function pointer to be called whenever that event actually occurs. And then you can unregister it, and then there's an event fire if you want to actually kick off an event. And that's all there is to it. It's super simple. Let's see. Remember making use of events while playing with Unreal. Was trying to dig into that architecture a bit more. Kind of got lost in the event loop and how events can be organized in a queue, etc. Yeah, so we don't have any sort of real queuing system too much for events. Like we do have some of that stuff in here. But not like our whole event system is not very crazy. Like the whole event system is less than 200 lines of code. So yeah, I mean, right now they're basically just fired instantly. Events are quite heavy operations. Most of the time you don't polling. Yeah, exactly. So it really depends on what you're doing, right? And like we have examples in code of where we handle input events, and then we also have examples in code of where we handle input via polling. It's honestly faster to just check one byte for if it's 1 or 0 every frame than having an interrupting callback. Yeah, exactly. So events, in this case, events are used primarily for internal usage, right? Communicating between systems or triggering things from like the platform/OS layer, things like that. That's really what they're used for. They're not really designed to be used for game code. Game code, we're probably going to have a separate system set up for that sits on top of this. Yeah, so that's kind of why we went with this. Is it's super simple, right? It doesn't really get much simpler than that. Oh, thank you for the hydrate redeem. Okay. What GNU extensions are you using with C? I'm using one. In D arrays, actually. And that is, let me find out. Right here. We are using type of. There's nothing in standard C like it. And so for our D array, I needed to use type of. This is the only reason I'm using GNU C instead of standard C99, is this right here. Everything else is standard C99. I think there's some GNU extension that allows you writing functions within functions. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. Usually simple is good because you can sit and make a hyper optimal event system, but then you end up only using it for like system events. Yeah, exactly. Which is what happened here. Yep. Until you make the game and want to figure out the events that are bottleneck prototype for the game. Yeah. Let's see. I'd use it for callbacks for sure. Poor man's lambdas for the win. Fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah. Okay. So, anyway. So now that we have this in place, the other half of what we were going to discuss tonight, and like I said, I don't know how far we're going to get with this. I just saw something here I need to change. This should be image VFS context. You know what? Let me do a quick search real quick for the word binary and just make sure that I didn't miss anything else here. I don't think I did. All right. Okay. So now that we have this in place, now what we can do is take a look at our texture system and basically take everything that is in our runtime. Let's see, do I have... So everything that is in our runtime under resources, handlers. Let me expand this a little bit. So everything that is under this handler texture, right? Everything that's in here, we are going to move to the texture system, right? Which isn't all that much code if I remember correctly. And I'm thinking we could probably actually even eliminate some of this stuff as well. Because this deals with some of the old, or the resource system that we're getting ready to eliminate. So we can kind of code around that. So a lot of this stuff is probably going to be going away. And I think, let's see, does this actually, this does actually communicate with the renderer to actually upload the texture data. Yes, it does. Okay. So all of this kind of stuff we're going to keep in terms of acquiring resources and writing texture data via the renderer and all that stuff, right? All of that kind of stuff we're going to keep. This typed resource business, we don't need to keep a lot of that stuff. And in fact, typed resource is going to be changing to, we have this K resource texture structure right here. And so this is actually going to go away, and it's going to come out of resource types, and it's going to just become a K texture. And the K texture is essentially going to handle all, or hold all of this stuff here. And it's essentially, I think, going to wind up being almost the same layout minus this K resource base here. So the K resource base contains a few different things, like name, but like type and state we might wind up using, although we'll have a less generic version of that. Well, type we don't need. State we'll probably have some sort of state for that, for like all of these different states in terms of where it is loading, because that's, again, asynchronous potentially. Or it will be asynchronous actually when we upload to the GPU. We've got generation, and then we have tags, which I don't think I'm going to keep on textures. So it's actually going to wind up being a pretty pared down version of this. So I think what I'm going to do, let's delete this. We're going to actually take out, I think, we're going to take out all of the stuff having to do with textures out of this file entirely. K resource texture pixel data, texture request info, like all of this stuff we're going to simplify, and we're actually going to wind up removing a lot of this stuff too. So let's take a look at, I'm actually going to move this over here. So okay, resource types. Oops. All right. So I'll keep this here, and we're going to go to texture system. And I'm actually thinking the texture system itself is probably going to need a little bit of updating as well. So let's just take a look really quickly at what it is that we're working with here. So our texture system request is the first thing. So attempts to acquire a texture with the given name. If it has not yet been loaded, this triggers it to load. If the texture is not found, a pointer to the default texture is returned. If the texture is found and loaded, its reference counter is incremented. Which our resource system was actually handling reference counting. But since we're going to get rid of that, I'm actually going to put it back into the texture system, because resource or reference counting matters for some systems and it doesn't matter for others. And then we also have this resource loaded user callback, right? So again, texture loading is an asynchronous operation, which we actually didn't put here in the comments, so we should probably fix that. The other weird thing here is we have this texture system request name and then package name, right? And this package name is always required, which we don't necessarily want either. So we need to think about how we actually want to handle this, right? And then this is the asynchronous version, so it has like a listener and callback option. And so similar to what we did with our asset system, I think the texture system ought to maybe have something similar, right? Where we have an asynchronous version and a synchronous version. That way, if we have code, user code, that relies on the texture being loaded, we can just use the synchronous version, and we don't have to worry about, a sort of callback hell. And then if we have, if our user code doesn't care when it's loaded, then we can sort of, not worry about it. Let's see. Windows has raw input API as well. Problem on Windows is you have to register system callbacks anyways. And Windows can call you at any time with an event, so it becomes a pain in the ass. Yes, that is true. It is. Sometimes event handling at the OS layer is really kind of tricky, for sure. We had some issues with that on Linux as well when we were first writing all that stuff out. Okay, so we have a bunch of different functions here, right? And so I'm thinking we probably ought to start thinking about maybe some ways that we can simplify this interface a little bit, if possible, right? So we have this sort of texture system request, which is asynchronous. So we might have a texture system request that's synchronous, right? And then we might have like a package specific version of it, where we have to provide the package name. And I'm also thinking we might just use strings here as well. And I know that like I wanted to get away from strings and user code and stuff like that, which is why we kind of had these things, but we do convert them to K-names under the hood. So I think by converting these to use strings at this level, it'll make the API a little bit simpler, because then we don't have to do K-name create string. We can just pass the string. I'm not sure about that yet, though, because I know the resource texture, the K-resource texture itself, actually does use K-names. I think I made an article on how RGFW handles raw input stuff a while back. Might be out of date now. Wish I had more time to rewrite those articles. Time and motivation, yes. Ain't that the truth? I've got a few articles on my website that I wanted to update for a while now, and I just don't have the time and or motivation myself, so I feel that to the core, for sure. Definitely feel that one. Okay. So, let's think about what our user code might look like when we're talking about textures, right? We have this basic request, then we have for cube map, right? And the cube map right now, yeah, the cube map only requires a name, right? And then it automatically loads textures with these names for all the different faces, right? Request cube writable, so that's a writable cube map. Request cube depth. Request writable, so that's like a writable texture that we create in memory. Writable arrayed. Request depth, right, which is going to be really just a writable texture, but with a depth flag. Request depth arrayed. So that's just the same thing as this, just arrayed. And then acquire textures as arrayed. So this one, this is essentially what would, this is what would call our asset system multiple times to load multiple textures, right? So this is, each texture essentially becomes a layer of the layered texture, right? And it's just loaded that way in memory. And so that's how we kind of handle arrayed textures at the moment. And then we have release, resize, and write data. Okay, so these can probably stay as they are. But we have a lot of functions here that all have their uses. The question is, can we reduce this any? So I think cube is important, right? Because that is a different type of request, right? I think layered is important. Writable is important, right? And then we have cube writable. Cube depth. So maybe, some of these things like depth has a include stencil, right? So do we include a stencil texture in the depth? So any of these that are talking about depth has that include stencil. And then we also have this multi-frame buffering, which is if the renderer uses, let me rephrase that. If the texture is used in such a way where there is more than one of it, essentially, or more than one texture resource under the hood because of multi-buffering, so double buffering or triple buffering when you're talking about rendering frames, right? Then you would need to handle multi-frame buffering, right? You would need to flip that on. The majority of our textures are not that way, but some of them have to be because maybe we need to render to a texture, and we need to have a texture resource for each internal frame within that, right? For the double or triple buffering. And so that's what that is. And then, okay. So this might actually be, let me close this for a second. This might actually be it might actually make more sense if we were to have like a configuration structure for one of these things. So we'll have just like a regular texture system request, which just gives you, a color texture that's a 2D texture that takes one single asset and loads it from disk. And then maybe we'll have anything else that's beyond that. We'll have another function that takes a configuration structure that essentially turns all of these functions into just one, right? And you can essentially just set all of these various flags. And then instead of having this whole set of functions, it becomes a configuration object, right? So maybe in this way for this system, we go backwards. The opposite direction of kind of how we're doing it for assets. I think that makes more sense, right? So maybe we have, let's just do this here. All right, so first of all, let's take all of this stuff. do I want to... I really need to move these things first. Various types of texture. So like the texture type, texture format, and texture flag. Those probably don't belong here. Texture flag bits too. We can take all of this and this is going to be a runtime thing. So instead of resource types, I guess we could put this with the texture system, because that's where the... Let's take all of this stuff actually out of here. Let's take all of this. I guess even this. I don't know if we're going to need this. And this. Yeah, let's take all this stuff out of here. And put it here. Right, so this is going to be texture type is fine, texture format's fine, texture flag is fine. This is fine. So instead of k resource texture, we're just going to have k texture. And then I guess what we could do is do kname name. Right, and not worry about the base texture type. Or the base resource type, right? Because we don't have like that resource type anymore. So I have texture type, width, height, format, array size, flags, MIP levels, and a handle to the renderer texture internal, like specific data, right? Texture pixel data. I am thinking, I feel like these can go as well, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment them out for now. I'm just going to do, I'm going to do a no check-in on that. Okay. I feel like this makes more sense. So everything we're going to do is dealing with a K texture, right? So when we talk about this type of resource, right, we're going to have something that essentially looks very much like this. I'm going to put this here, right? And this is going to be K texture. And let's do texture system. Let's actually maybe not do texture system. Let's actually just do texture load. I think that's fine, right? And so that's going to be texture name. We're not going to do package name for this one. Actually, let's duplicate this guy. Come back to that in a second. So we're not going to do package name for this one. We're not going to have... I guess we'll have a loader, or a listener and a callback for this one. I think, though, we should probably come up with a different function pointer type. So let's just grab this and come back here and define what that looks like. So we're going to do texture loaded user callback. Instead of a K resource, this is going to be K texture with a listener, right? So that's just going to pass this listener along, and then this is going to be texture loaded user callback, right? So if our user code has something that needs to know about this, about when it's loaded, right? Then we'll provide that, but we'll keep it optional, right? So this is going to be the async version, and then this will be the sync version, right? And we'll just call this texture load sync, if I can spell it correctly. And so the sync version does not need any of that stuff, right? And then we're going to have another version of this from package, right? Kname, package name, and then this will be from package sync, kname, package name. All right. So that way, this is probably going to be the most common scenario. This will be the second most common scenario. And then the third scenario will essentially encapsulate everything else, right? So this is going to be texture load. What do I want to call this? Like EX, right? Is what like a lot of frameworks would call it. Like extended, right? So if you have like a super specific type of texture format or writable texture or something like that that you wanted to create, you would essentially call this. I guess I'll call it that for now, and we'll come back to it. So instead of passing listener and callback here, what we'll actually do is we'll do a type def struct. Wow, completely butchered that. K texture load options. K texture load options, right? And so this would be here. Right, so you'd have listener callback. You could also have, let's see, I suppose we could have synchronous be an option too and just eliminate this entirely, right? So B8's synchronous, right? And then we could have other options in here. And I guess Booleans are fine for this, right? So we could have is writable. B8 is depth. B8 is stencil. B8's, what do we call that for multi-buffering? Multi-frame buffering. Multi-frame buffering. Let's see. What are some of the other things? Let's see. Auto release. We can talk about that too. Width height format's another one. So we could do format. Suppose we could put that up here. We could do U32 width, U32 height, U32 depth. Yeah, I know. I don't like all the Booleans, but remember, this is just to request the thing that we're doing, right? So I could, theoretically, instead of that, right, I could use an enumeration here, but you still have the same number of states, right? And actually, this isn't even states. This is literally what type of texture are we loading, right? So really, this is just allowing us to not have 60 different functions here. That's really it. But yes, I am hearing the heavy Mike Acton breathing in my soul for sure. What's a no check-in? usually a tag in conjunction with the get preprocess that halts the commit whenever it finds no check-in inside the code base. Yes, that's exactly what it is. So I have something set in where if I go to commit, when I go to commit, it checks the diff for this specific text to say, does this no check-in, this specifically exist in any file or any change that I'm about to put in? And if it does, it stops that process. Forgive him, Mike. He is but a flawed human. Does not mean to invoke your wrath. Surely the compiler is smart enough to combine them and release? No, it won't. Realistically, they could be one U8 with flag set. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I could do this with flags, right? But like, in terms of an API, it's a hell of a lot easier to just set booleans, right? And I'm thinking about, user or end user usability here, right? So yeah, I mean, you're not wrong though, but I think it's way easier when you're requesting something to just set these versus setting flags. It's unnecessary, yeah. Yeah, I mean, but you're right though. You're totally right. Maybe bool in C++ will combine it since it's an actual keyword. I don't think so. I've never heard of that happening. I don't see how it would know to do that. And actually, it couldn't do that, right? Because you've got memory layout to think about, right? Like that would actually change the size of the structure. Like that would be really bad. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Bit flags would work, right? But like thinking about, I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other, right? I'm not now. If I were storing this, if I were actually storing this on the texture itself, then absolutely I would use bit flags. But this isn't getting stored. This is used during the request to determine what path of code to take, and that's it. Yeah, this is just going to live on the stack. Exactly. Yep, exactly. So like if I were storing this along with the texture, which some of that does get stored along with the texture. So we do actually have texture flag bits here. Which if we take a look at this, like these texture flags, like these different flags right here are all bit fields, right? So like I am doing that here, where like it's flagged as a depth texture or a stencil texture or, render buffering, right? Like I do store these this way on the actual texture. It's actually stored this way. This is literally just for requesting the texture. That's it. So yeah, and in this case, I'm not too worried about that. All right, I feel like I'm missing something though. Let me look at some of these other ones here. So we have dimension, that's not going to be needed. Auto release. So auto release, we probably ought to talk about that for a second. Has transparency. That's another one. Actually, technically, so this has transparency is actually used for queries later on when we're looking at the texture to see if it has transparency or not, right? Like you can specify that. I guess we could specify that. The only time we actually allow you to specify that, though, is when you're making a writable texture, essentially. Otherwise, and it's even not, I don't know if we're going to allow that or not. I don't know if that's necessary. I feel like if we're writing the texture data, like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to take that one in. I don't think we're going to do that. I think we're going to leave that out. Auto release is something worth discussing. So, and again, so what auto release is is the texture system will ref count all of the textures, right? So anytime we perform a texture load, there's going to be a cache internally that will store a pointer to that texture by name, right? And so we'll essentially have a pointer to the texture is essentially the name of the texture is essentially the key, and then we'll have a value that contains the pointer to the texture and a reference count. And so internally, if we did texture load twice on a particular texture, then that ref counter would be 2. And then if we do texture release or unload or whatever we're going to call it, every time you do that, it would shrink that by 1. And so if we decrement that and it hits 0, then what do we do with it, right? So if we set auto release to true, then what we can do is we say, well, once the last reference from this texture has been released, go ahead and release the texture too. We don't want to keep it in memory. And that's probably going to be the default case, right? So I think anytime we execute any of these 4 functions here, the default case is going to be, auto release is going to be true. The only time that it won't be is if you use this and explicitly set it to false, right? Or don't set it at all. Like if you 0 it and don't set it, right? And I think that's an okay default to have, right? So we'll havektexture load options. I still don't like that ex term. It's kind of extended or what are we Windows? Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I don't like it. What can I call that? It's like a You guys have any name ideas for that? What's the difference? Yeah, I mean, so essentially all of these functions are kind of our standard way of loading textures, right? And this is sort of the configurable way to load a texture. Where we can provide options to do so. Oh, I just thought of something else we need to include in here. Let's see, we can go here. Package name. Load with options. I guess that works for now. Simple enough, right? I thought that was a little bit too straightforward, actually, but I guess now that I see it written out, it's fine. Thank you for the follow, by the way. Appreciate that. It's a bit verbose, but gets the message across. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking too, but heck with it. All right. So, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome. Okay, so let's see. This is going to be our entire API. So it's essentially going to replace all of this stuff here. So I'm going to hold on to this stuff for a minute because I'm going to need some of this comment verbiage. But this is essentially what I'm thinking of, right? So this is going to be async auto release equals true. Default options, right? And then this is going to be the same thing. There we go. Default options. The only difference is you specify a package name here, right? This is what's going to be used 90% of the time, I think. This will probably be right behind it, and then these two right behind that. And then this one is going to be used for creating anything specialty. I guess the last thing we need to do is void texture. Do we do release? Oh, you know what? We should probably go with acquire and release instead of load. Yeah. Okay, so this is actually just going to take a... Well, there's two ways we could do this. We could do it by name, or we could do it by a texture pointer. We are going to have texture pointers, so I guess that is a safe way to do it. And then we could also maybe have a release by name. I don't know if we need this. But we'll have it. So essentially, we'll read the texture name here and probably wind up calling release by name, or maybe release by name will get a texture pointer and call this guy under the head, one way or the other. You like load texture too? Yeah. Classic. Been lurking for a bit, got rated in. Well, welcome. First time chatter, Insber. And thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Asked Gemini for suggestions, and it gave load texture with options, load texture with config, load texture EX, and load texture advanced. Yeah. I think with options is probably the best one of those. I was trying to think of something a little bit more clever, but I think that's probably going to be it. Okay. So I think what we'll do is we'll essentially implement the functions, or implement the logic out of these one at a time, right? So we'll have a few different code paths we'll go down, depending on whether or not it's synchronous, which might not always matter depending on some of the other things here, right? So, for example, if we create a writable texture, then it's probably going to ignore synchronous, right? It's probably synchronous is probably only ever going to be used if we are loading an actual image asset. Otherwise, there's no reason for this to be asynchronous, unless we wait a minute. There's actually something I just thought of that might be a bit of an issue with this. So whenever we upload texture data, that could potentially be a asynchronous operation. It's not right now. Well, it kind of is though, because it can be deferred to the next frame. So it might not actually be immediately available on the GPU after the function returns. So, do we even have a synchronous version of this? Or do we always just assume it's asynchronous? Only the upload of the texture data is actually deferred to the next frame. So the actual creation of the underlying texture object is immediate. The allocation of the memory and all that stuff, that's all immediate. So technically the texture would be usable right away, even if you technically haven't uploaded anything to it. So really it would be a matter of determining what the synchronous flag would do is basically determine, do we need to, instead of deferring the upload to the next frame, do it immediately, which we do have the capability to do in the renderer. There's a flag we can pass for that. Okay. Yeah. I was considering getting rid of this for a minute, but no, I don't think we can. Load texture with swag. Side code, I like that one. That's funny. Load texture with vibes. That's very funny. Hamlet RPG, thank you for the tier 1 sub. Thank you so much for the support. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. That means a lot. That support goes a long way too, because we're eventually going to have to get some assets and things like that too. So your support there definitely helps me out. Thank you so much for that. Vibe check and load texture. Do we define vibe loading? Like people have defined vibe coding. Do we define vibe loading and just kind of reach out to ChatGPT and have it generate code on the fly? That will definitely be wrong and crash the engine. But we add a point in there for lulz anyways. Vibe loading. Yeah. I wonder what vibe loading would actually be. Like what? It's very funny to think about. Maybe we implement vibe loading. Maybe we have a vibe loading stream. All right. All right, I think this is going to be the API that we're going to roll with. This on the surface, I think, gives us everything that we need. So what I'm going to do, though, since we are almost out of time for tonight, because I do have to get up and work in the morning, is this is probably where I'm going to stop for tonight. And then tomorrow we will actually implement this stuff when we come on stream. Tomorrow, loading assets based on the given player's description of the game feel. That's deeply hilarious, actually. We should make a game eventually just based around that, where it just like loads whatever assets it thinks are appropriate at the moment, which is really nothing but a huge weighted list of random numbers. And it's like, yeah, just tell the player to like roll their face on the keyboard and it just loads assets based off of that. I'm not mad at it. Games should just generate everything on the fly by prompting an LLM. Like I need to drop an item. Can you generate a random item for me? And just drop it in the scene. Generates the model and everything terribly. That's actually pretty funny. If that was something that was that like could run locally, I would actually consider doing that. Just for the lulz, but that would probably get pretty expensive pretty quick. Because, you know, blah servers. Anyway, let me find somebody to raid. See if we can't find somebody that's doing something. Randy is streaming. You know what? I've never raided Randy before. He's usually not on, so let's do that. Swag game designing. Let's see what he's up to. All right. So yeah, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. It was awesome having you guys here and you know, participating and chatting, and it's been a lot of fun. So we will be back tomorrow night where we'll pick this up. And yeah, if you haven't already, I would appreciate a follow and or subscribe over on the YouTube side. It helps me out grow the channel. And yeah, thank you guys so much. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.